Shtayr of the Shabbos, B'shas Rav the Ravin. We have completed Parshas Truma and wir gehen ran in Parshas Tetzaveh. Die erste zwei Werte von Va'atu Tetzaveh Hatz the Meforshim explain that the word Tetzaveh means B'tzav Sechoda, togetherness. That's what Shalashidus is all about. A zman of being together. A zman of Achai V'reyai. But tonight's matzav, tonight's zman, I must tell you, is the highest moment of all the zmanim throughout the year. And I will quote to you the Heilige Chassam Sofer B'Lashon Kodshoy. The Chassam Sofer says, tonight is Zion Oder. Zuk the Heilige Chassam Sofer. Ein loni simcha v'toiv levov kiyoim Zion Oder. There is no other zman in Klal Yisrael of simcha and good heart, of simcha neke matzav of the heart, like the zman of Zion Oder, which is tonight. And he says, V'hoy choshev yoyse miyoyim matan Torah. And the zman of Zion Oder is more choshev than the yoyim of matan Torah. So we are now standing in a most precious moment. A zman which is greater than Simchas Torah with Simcha. A zman which is greater than Kabbalas HaTorah with the Simcha. And the Mefarshim explain that Zion Oder has such koiches in Shemayim because that was the day that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote 13 Sifrei Torah. There is no higher moment during the entire year than right now. And just to explain to you how choshev the zman is, we all know Lag BaOmer, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai is a meirik zman. Let me tell you, Rabbi Yisai, that the Zohar HaKodesh writes that Reb Shimon Bar Yochai was Nishmas Moshe Rabbeinu. And if you all know, the Zman of Zion Oder is always on the same day as Lag BaOmer. Lag BaOmer will be on Sunday. And if you equivalent Moshe 345, that's the equivalent of Lag BaOmer. And on Sukkot, the Ishpize de Moshe is also on the same day of Zion Oder. So we have a combination here of Simcha, of Ishpize de Moshe, of Lag BaOmer, and Zion Oder. That's a Chut HaMeshulesh. That's a Meidike Choshev Zman. And on this man, we all have the zechia and the opportunity to hear Divrei Yissocher, Divrei Chizuk, and Divrei Simcha from Rabbi Frand, one of the Rosh Hashivas of Nei Yisrael of Baltimore. It is my honor and covet to call upon this man. The Rosh Hashiva should come and address the Oiler.
There's a thank you that one gives in the beginning, and there's a thank you that one gives in the end. You know, this has been for me as I'm sure it has been for many of you, it has been an amazing Shabbos, an amazing 25 hours. When I came in here on Friday afternoon, so other than Rabbi Dishon, who I must say was such a welcome and welcoming face, I knew absolutely nobody here. And I must thank Rabbi Dishon publicly for his gracious achnozes orchim and how he made me feel so welcome. Rav Shol Rosen and Rav Naftali Weiss were disembodied voices to me. They're people that spoke to me over the telephone, but I had no idea who they are or what they were like. And I must say that they have treated me, and as they've treated, I'm sure, everybody, with such warmth and graciousness. And it has really been a very, very uplifting Shabbos for me. To see this olam, and to see how this olam acts, and see how this olam praves a Shabbos. I, for better or for worse, am a dyed-in-the-wool Litvak Yeki. As I mentioned to Rabbi Rosen, I have danced this Shabbos more than I have in the entire last year. That's not a guzma. But to see the simcha which everyone greets the Shabbos and enjoys the Shabbos and enjoys each other's company was really an uplifting experience for me. And as Rabbi Weiss said when he greeted me, he said that I will come back, I will leave this Shabbos with inspiration. My only hope is that you can leave with even only a portion of the type of inspiration that I had. And I mean it sincerely, and I mean that honestly. And Hareze bol l'lamed v'nimsa lamed. Sometimes you come to teach, and you wind up learning more than you taught. The erste kasha that Rabbi Weiss began the Shabbos with was Vasepis Parshas Truma. I'm not going to farent for that kasha, but I think that it is meaningful and significant that this is, after all, Chodesh Adar. I'd like to begin by quoting an interesting Gemara in Megillah, which the Daf Yomi just recently learned. I think is an appropriate message, not only for Chodesh Adar, but for this particular Kehillah. The Gemara says in Megillah that when Haman came to take Mordechai on the parade, which he was compelled to take him because of Achashverosh's command, says the Gemara, Azal Ashkeche di Yosiv Rabbanan Kamei. He found Mordechai teaching Talmidim. Umachvi lehu hilchas kemitza l'Rabbanan. And they were learning hilchas kemitza. They were learning the halachas of how to bring a korban mincha. Korban mincha is a korban that was brought in the Beis Hamikdash. There's a special ceremony called the kemitza, how to bring the korban mincha. Mordechai HaTzadik was sitting there and he was learning with the Talmidim the laws of the korban mincha, the laws of the kemitza. Zot the Gemara an interessante Sach. Omer lahu asa milu kumtze kimcha didchu bedochi asara alfei kikri kaspa didi. Haman made an amazing statement. And Haman tells Mordechai, in effect, the game is over. You won. I'm not going to win. Because your little kemitza, your little amount of flour that you're makriv on the mizbeach as a korban mincha, that has the power to overwhelm the asara alfei kikri didi. My whole gzeira, the whole plot to destroy and annihilate the Jews is going to be trumped by the korban mincha of you. Peladik Gemara. This Gemara is in effect saying is that at this point in time, Haman knew it was all over. What's the pshat in this Gemara? What did Haman see by the fact that Mordechai was teaching the laws of Kemitza What did he see that made him so discouraged that he in fact threw in the towel, so to speak? Zok the Vishnitzer Rebbe, the people that heard me last night at the Einig Shabbos, they heard me quoting Litvak after Litvak after Litvak. So in the spirit of... I'll talk about it.
No.
Let me take it away.
I may be a Litvak, but I'm not Machal Shabbos. So the Vishnitzer Rebbe is auch, was epis, what did Haman see that made him throw in the towel? So the Vishnitzer Rebbe, because if they were to be learning anything, Haman would have expected that they should be learning Hilchos Kiddush Hashem. That they should be learning how to die al Kiddush Hashem. Because after all, they were finished. It was just a matter of time. Here they were learning something. They were not only learning Hilchos Kiddush Hashem, but they were learning something about a Beis Hamikdash that did not exist, and that al pi derech hateva would never exist. So why on earth are you learning halachis that are negea the Beis Hamikdash when you're here sitting in Bavel, in Golis, and I'm about to destroy you, and you're learning Hilchos Kmitza, Hilchos Avenis Beis Hamikdash, how to bring a korban? The answer is because Mordechai exhibited something that is, in fact, the Yissocher of Klal Yisrael. And that is a Yid never gives up. And that's what shook Haman to his boots. Because a Yid hat azah emunah, that in the face of overwhelming odds, in face of a situation that seemed desperate, that there's no Yeshua, that a Yid has an emunah, that you always have to have hope. Then Haman said, this is a people that I will never vanquish. This is a people that I will never conquer. Because that's the midah of being a Yid. A Yid doesn't give up hope. And when you're dealing with an enemy that doesn't give up hope, you cannot conquer that enemy. Ish Yehudi haya b'Shushan Habira u'shmoi Mordechai. He was a Yehudi. We're Yidden. We are Yehudim. And that name defines our essence. Have you ever wondered why we're called Yidden? Whichever language it may be, whether it's Ivrit and Lashon Kodesh and it's Yehudi, whether it's Jew and it's English and it's Jew, whether it's German and it's Juden, whether it's Russian and it's Jid, whatever language it may be, but we're called Yidden, we're called Jews. We're called Al Shem Yehuda. Why Yehuda? There were 12 Shiftei Kah. Why aren't we called Reuvenim? Why aren't we called Shimonim? Why aren't we called Godim? Why are we called Yehudim? Because Yehuda demonstrated a midah that is the defining midah of what it means to be a Jew. And it is you don't give up hope. Because when Yehuda faced his brother Yosef in what seemed to be a desperate situation. They had caught Binyamin with the goods. They knew that it was up. Everybody gave up hope. Vayigash Yehuda. Yehuda went to Yosef and said, this is not going to happen. And he was payal. And that is Yehuda Ata Yechucha Achecha Zok the Targum, that you're going to always be called Yehudim. Jews are going to be called in your name. Because you exhibited that midah that is the quintessential midah of being a Yid. Or as Rav Tzadok writes, Ein li Yehudi lehisyayish mishum davar. Jews never give up. Bein binyonei haguf, whether it refers to physical matters, bein binyonei hanefesh. Ein yiush klal etzel isha Yehudi. It is not Jewish to give up. And it is particularly Jewish and Yiddish, and to be a Yid, that in spite of the odds, to persevere and never give up. In fact, Rav Tzadok writes, and he says ironically, V'chol binyan uma Yisraelis haya achar hayiush hagomer. The history of the Jewish people, the history of Yiddishkeit, came about only after total and absolute Yiush. The Avraham, the Sarah, Zikanim Hayu. Because here you have a man that's 99 years old and a wife who's 90 years old who has never ever given birth. And they were in fact desperate. And after that, then they have a baby. Haloi dovaru. What's the pshat? The Rebbeinu Shalom wants to painik Avraham Avinu? He wants them to go to Shiva Madura Gehenim until she finally has a baby? Avraham Oyhavi? Avraham, the beloved one of the Rebbeinu Shalom? Darf das durchgehen? Darf das durchmachen? Zok Rav Tzadok, Me'es Hashem hoysa zois. This is a hashgacha. This is a limud l'dayros. Sheyiyeh binyan ha'uma dafka achar hayiush hagomer. That Yiddishkeit, Yidden, came into existence after that what seemed to be a desperate situation. Ki zeh kol ha'adam ha'yisraeli. This is the mitzias of a Jew. Lahamin, to believe, belevu v'nefesh. She'ein lehisyayish klal. Don't give up. The la'olam Hashem yizbarach yochel la'azor. V'hayipolei me Hashem davar. The word spoken by Yirmiyah Hanavi, when the Rebbeinu Shalom told Yirmiyah Hanavi that the impending Churban, go out and buy fields and write down the shtar, because there will come a time that people will come back to this land and they'll once again plant and they'll once again build. And Yirmiyah Hanavi doubted the Rebbeinu Shalom Kaviyachal, and the Rebbeinu Shalom says to Yirmiyah, Hayipolei me Hashem davar. That's the history of the Jewish people. And the Rebbeinu Shalom did that to Avraham Avinu because he knew that there would be times throughout our history that people would look at their situations as desperate. And he wanted this to be the paradigm, to be the mashal. That Eli Yehudi L'Hisyayish Klal. And ironically, to be miyayesh and to give up is self-destructive behavior. There's nothing worse that you can do to yourselves than to give up. Now, the Ishbitzer Rebbe once explained that which is a halacha that every man in this room, I'm sure, is aware of, but I'm not so sure about the women in the room. And that's a halacha called Yiyush. An entire sugya Masechta Bava Metzia. The sugya of Yiyush is that if a person loses an object, he loses an Aveda, there's a mitzvah aseh d'oraisa to return the lost object. Hashavas Aveda. There's no such concept in Yiddishkeit as finders, keepers, losers, weepers. Except if the person that lost the object is miyayesh. He gives up hope. He says, I'm never going to get that pen back. I'm never going to find those pair of glasses. I'm never going to find that ring. When the person gives up hope and then somebody finds it, then in fact, finders keepers. Zot the Ishbitzer, that's the halacha. Now what's the hashkafa behind the halacha? Zot the Ishbitzer, because a chayfetz that is in your possession is yours. And as long as I own that chayfetz, that ring may be lost, and that ring may be out of my rishus, and that ring may be inaccessible to me, but as long as I have not given up hope on that ring, there is still a tenuous connection between me and that ring, and that is my hope. So therefore that ring is still mine. It's still, I'm connected to it because I expect and I hope and I wish I'll get it back. But the minute you give up hope on that ring, you have severed the last connection between you and that item. For every machla, there is a potential refuah. Potential. For every tzara, there is a potential Yeshua. But there has to be a connection between me and that refuah. Between me and that Yeshua. The connection that I have with the potential refuah or Yeshua is my tikva, is my hope. Once I give up hope, the last connection has been severed, has been cut. And that's why it is so vitally important not to give up hope. Because when you give up hope, you may have cut the last connection between you and that which you want so dearly. That's the history of Klal Yisrael as a klal. That's the history of each individual Yid. Don't give up on Klal Yisrael, and don't give up on yourself. And unfortunately, there have been too many people over the course of history that have bet against Klal Yisrael, that have given up, that have made the tragic mistake of thinking, Eden are finished. Let me tell you a story that I heard from Rabbi Yisrael Reisman, who I'm sure is no stranger to many of you. when he was a young boy growing up in Brooklyn, New York, he lived next door to a person that he assumed wasn't Jewish. Because the person kept absolutely nothing. Not Shabbos, not Yom Tif, not Yom Kippur, not Mezuzah, absolutely nothing. A guy. One day, he and his friends were playing stickball. For those of you who are not from New York, stickball is when you take the handle of a broom and you play baseball with it, thinking that you're playing baseball. For those of us who are brought outside of New York, we use a thing called a bat. So they're playing stickball in the street. This must be a Maisa from 25, 30, 35 years ago. So they're playing in the street, and this neighbor, the guy, is watching them play baseball. And after the game, this fellow goes up to Rabbi Reisman, to Yisrael Reisman, Struli Reisman, and he says to him, "You know I'm Jewish." And then he begins to say Baal Peh, the Mishnayos of Perek HaMeniach. Baal Peh. And he's incredulous. He says, I was Amid. I was in Europe. I went to Cheder. But I went through the Holocaust. And I was absolutely certain that the Jewish people were finished. And there would never ever again be Fruma Yidden. If I would have known that 35 years after the Holocaust, there would be boys in Brooklyn with tzitzis hanging out and payas flying, that they would be playing stickball in the streets of Brooklyn, I would not have given up on Yiddishkeit. He made that mistake. He made the mistake of giving up on Eden. That's a fatal, tragic mistake that no one should ever do. Not on the klal and not on the prat. Not on the tzibur and not on the yochid. I'm sure that many of you heard of the Panovich Rav Zecher Tzadik Livracha. The Panovich Rav was one of the few people that survived and escaped Panovich, went to Eretz Yisrael and built the magnificent Panovich Yeshiva that today is thriving at Bnei Brak. The Panovich Rav was one of the most prolific fundraisers in the history of Klal Yisrael. He was a Meshunadik, a fundraiser. And he traveled the world over, from America